I'm David Hunt. My guest today is somebody I've known for a few years now, and he's got one of those smiles. It's the cutest smile you could ever imagine. He's actually blushing now, which is good because that's what I wanted to happen. And we'll get to the reason on how I know him a little bit later. He's from Sydney. Boo. We're in Melbourne. He's from Sydney. He follows the Swans, which is okay, because when I lived in Sydney, I used to follow the Swans. He is a marketing, so it's Matt from marketing that we're chatting with. And he runs this show on Joy, which I won't talk too much about it now because it's just the most beautiful show, and it's so important that Joy 94.9 has this show. I am talking, originally his ancestors are from Scotland, but we won't hold that against him, but he doesn't speak with a Scottish accent. Matt McDonell, hello.
Hello, David. I'm not wearing a kilt today.
You're not wearing your kilt?
Sorry to disappoint.
So would you wear underpants underneath the kilt or not?
I would,
You would, yeah. So welcome, Matt.
Thank you.
So tell us your life growing up in Sydney. How was it?
I had a really good upbringing. Grew up in the west of Sydney, sort of the northwest, the Bible Belt of Sydney, and had a normal, I guess, middle class upbringing.
Religious? Talking about Bible Belt?
Went to church because I had to as a kid. Went to a Catholic school, but outside of that, not something I would say we were overly religious.
Parents?
Wonderful role models. They were together 58 years. Sorry, married 58 years, together 64 years, and brought up 4 kids. Did everything they could to help us, and really let us go different paths. They didn't try to influence us in any way. They just sort of, whichever way we all started as we found ourselves, they fully supported us.
I was going to ask about siblings, so you got 3.
Yeah.
What are they?
2 brothers, 1 sister, all
Right.
older. I'm the baby.
Oh, the baby. Do you have much to do with them, or because
Yes.
you're living in a different city now?
Yeah, no, I'm up in Sydney all the time. I've got 4 nieces, 1 nephew as well, so I'm always up and back. We've got a very close family.
Fantastic. And extended family as well? Yeah.
Massive extended family.
Right.
So my grandparents were very big on, keeping the family together. So our on Christmas Day is just our little family gathering. On Boxing Day, we hire a hall.
Whoa.
So that all the family can come. There's usually about 80 people. Everybody
Whoa.
brings food. So there's this massive table with food all down it, and then there's a competition for who makes the best dessert.
Have you ever won?
I have not. My sister has.
Oh, right. Okay. What's the prize? Is there a prize or not?
It's a token thing.
Yeah.
Whatever they find.
Okay. Coming out. When did you realise that maybe you might be gay? Was it when you were a kid? And where was the coming out situation for you?
Probably sort of had feelings that I wasn't quite like everyone else. In high school, sort of that middle period of high school, where I'd sort of look at guys with a fascination, with a... I didn't have the words to know that was sort of, if you like, desire. It was more fascination.
Yeah.
And of course, it was a boys' school. In that environment, you don't show that you're gay because you're going to get picked on.
Yeah.
But it kind of took me a bit longer to get to a stage where I was comfortable with that. Growing up, I really didn't have the words for it. It wasn't really spoken about at home. The only time I'd see the words gay is when the news clip came on about Mardi Gras. I remember my dad, Mum and Dad went overseas, and they'd happened to arrive in London on Pride Day there, and he was telling everybody the story, and they came around the corner and there's 100,000 bloody queers coming down the road. I guess at that stage I wasn't feeling like it was something that I wanted, even if I knew that was where I was going to go. So it took me a little while longer. I was also involved in the scouting movement, so I was quite cautious about what might transpire there as well.
So at school you didn't end up sort of hanging out with other guys that might have been gay, or that didn't happen at all?
Not really.
Or were they picked on a bit? The
Yeah.
gay kids?
I think there's definitely that picking on thing. I was never in the cool kids class. I was never in the outliers class. I was sort of in that middle group and just seemed to fit in wherever.
Yeah.
I was always able to do different things at school as well, from sport to debating to to drama. So I just kind of morphed wherever.
You've always been involved in sport. So did that come from a kid, like growing up? Yeah.
Yeah, I think Mum and Dad encouraged us all to be involved in things. So whether that was sport or community groups, or to get involved.
The Scouts.
Scouts, absolutely.
How was the Scouts? Did you enjoy it?
Absolutely. Yeah. My two brothers were in it before I started, and I was like, you at that stage you had to be 8 to join, and at 7.5 they just had to let me join because I was so there. And I ended up stayed in till I was 26.
Right.
I was chairman of an international event that Australia hosted, and enjoyed my time thoroughly, made lifelong friends, and the skills, the things you learn, the people you meet was great. Travelled the world as well. So.
Travelled the world, and you actually met overseas somebody that I met through you at Queer Film Festival one night. You probably don't remember introducing me to Scotty, and you met, and I know he's heavily involved in scouting, and I've done an interview on this show with him.
Yes.
And you met him overseas.
In Canada, yeah. So we'd both gone, I was living in Sydney at the time, we'd both gone across. The Canadian Rovers, that's the 18 to 26-year-olds, were having their first big gathering.
Yep.
And the message went out around Australia this was happening, and for some reason Australians all just went, yeah, we're going to be there to help them. So there were actually more Australians than Canadians at this event. We were just meeting up to be able to take the transport to the event, and happened to meet this guy from Melbourne, and we started chatting, and 25 years later, we're still best of friends.
I jumped a bit because we mentioned scouting. So sport, you got heavily involved in sport to the extent that you still play sport now. And I've actually even seen you with hockey sticks or tennis rackets.
Badminton rackets, yes.
Yeah, tram stops at the oddest places I've bumped into you. What happened when you left school? You went to uni, did you? Or?
Yeah, I started at uni, and then it just didn't quite, it was hard work. And there were probably lots of things going on at that stage as well. And so I went to start a job at the Windsor bus depot in Sydney, which is like way out on the edge of Sydney. And very soon they realised that I had too many ideas and too much energy to be out there, and they brought me into their coach tourism business. And so I spent lots of time in both tours and tourism and all the sort of the service sectors there.
At this stage, had you started to come out? Had that started to happen yet, or not?
It was starting, as in I was going out and exploring what this thing was, and going to. I remember going to the first pub I went to was the Flinders in Sydney, or Flindergarten as everybody used to call it, and I knew that was gay because it had pink neon. That was the level of my understanding of what the gay community was, and I probably had some, in those early days, had some real prejudices about. I didn't want to be, I didn't wear sequin pants, and I didn't do this. I was really had a bit of internal things to deal with, and then the more people I met, the more I realised this is such a wonderful, diverse, mixed community, and very rich, all the richer for it.
So did you go by yourself originally to the Flinders?
Yeah, my first experience, I literally walked in, walked around the bar, absolutely petrified, and walked out the back door.
Oh, okay.
And that was it. So I then found a friend came out to me, and then eventually I came out to him, and we went out more on the town in that way.
What was the, where did you get involved in marketing? Because was that a natural progression because of what you were doing with this bus touring company?
I always have ideas, and I always have an innate sense of what might work in a certain space. So it kind of just came naturally, and then when I did do study, it's solidified it, and it's just become a career.
You still haven't really spoken about the real coming out.
Okay,
yet.
So coming out to family was actually, I was tired of hiding. I just became less and less cautious about what I said and did. I never wanted to lie to anybody, so I'd just sort of say, I'm going into town. I'm going out with my friends. And eventually,
still living at home?
Still living at home.
Right.
And it was the Oxford's 10th birthday party thing, and my friend had got me a ticket to it. Unknown to me, I'd put it in my back pocket at the end of the night and put my jeans into the wash at home, and then the next day came back and beside my bed was this ticket. So I knew that Mum had sort of looked at that, gone, the Oxford Hotel, put two and two together.
Would she have known that the Oxford Hotel was a gay hotel? Yeah.
Well, whether she knew, but it had the Oxford Street was at its prime at this time. So yes, she knew. And eventually we had a real heart-to-heart and lots of tears. And she said, don't tell Dad. Don't tell Dad. I know your father. I'll tell him. Don't tell Dad. And I actually wasn't worried about Dad. I was more worried about my eldest brother. But
oh, okay.
Yeah, I'll come back to that. But Mum and Dad went away, and then Mum told him, and he said, yeah, I thought so. And that just floored Mum. And she said, why? And he said, well, he hasn't had a girlfriend in a long time. And when we went over to his house, I'd moved out by this age, when he went over to his house, it was so clean.
Stereotype.
Yeah.
Well, but I've heard it so many times that the mothers get upset and the fathers take it, we'll move through this, and it really does surprise me, because you often think that it would be the dads that would be outraged, but it's not.
Yeah. And I was fairly comfortable that Dad would be okay.
Yeah, you said that.
But Mum was worried. Whereas my eldest brother, he's the most macho of the family. He was in the Defence Forces. He, ticked all those boxes. He was the one that I was probably thinking, if there was going to be a problem, it was going to be him. And then once sort of word got out, Mum rang him to tell him, and he rang me straight away and said, why didn't you tell us sooner? And I was like, oh my gosh, So my family have been fantastic.
Yeah, did you mind that your mother was the one that told him? Would you have liked to have been the one to have told him?
I was ready to tell him.
Yeah.
It kind of all happened quite quickly at that stage, so I
just accepted it.
It was out there. That was the weight that was lifted.
Yeah, and the lovely fact that he was so good about it.
That he called. Yeah.
So what made you move to Melbourne? What was the reasoning there?
My first flatmate when I moved out of home always reminds me that even back then I was saying that I'd like to try living in Melbourne. I had some friends down here. I always came down. He had a great time. This was the days when the Commercial Road was a vibrant place, and go out to Three Faces and the Exchange and have great nights out. So it's always been a seed planted in my mind, and then this job came up, and it wasn't actually, I'd cut it out, it was in the paper, I'd cut it out of the paper and I'd put it beside my desk.
Oh, those were the days.
Those were the days. And it was actually a really tough time. My mum had just had a stroke, and I just couldn't deal with it. But I had this thing cut out, and like 2 weeks after this had happened, I thought, it was like 10 o'clock at night. It's probably closed. I'm going to put in an application. Hammered out an application. Almost the next day, straight away, got a phone call saying, we're really interested. When can you come down? I said, maybe Thursday next week. How about 10 o'clock Wednesday? Right. Jump on a plane, get everything done. I walked into the interview. This is one of the things that it was one of those things it's just meant to happen. I walked into the interview. The guy that was interviewing me, my new boss, knew both of my referees and already rung them. And so the interview was actually really just a chat to make sure we got on well. Yeah. They offered me the job that same day, did a medical test, and then I was like, oh my God, I've got to pack up my life and move to Melbourne in the next 4 weeks. So it happened very quickly.
And you were working in Sydney? You had a job.
I was working in Sydney, yeah.
You had to resign?
No. Actually, at that point, I'd finished up in Wagga and I'd transitioned. I was just going to, I'd just come back from overseas from a trip. So I was actually sort of looking for work at that stage.
Yeah. How did you feel when you got here? What was the sensation like moving to a brand new city? But you were living in Wagga. Yeah,
so I did a 2-year stint in Wagga, at which time I figured out that I'm a city guy.
Right, so,
okay. Wagga's a nice place to visit. It's just not for me to live.
Yeah.
So Melbourne felt just really like home right from the start. I had a dream job. I was with Yarra Trams. You know, this is an iconic part of the city.
Yeah.
So it's a great way to introduce
ding.
yourself to people. Ding, ding. You know, and we did some really great things in my time there. You might know the Beware the Rhino campaign. So me and my team put that one together.
And you also got a Dolly Diamond. She was on tram stops.
We had the glam stops. They weren't tram stops, they were glam stops. Yes, and we did some great midsummer promotions with the Rainbow Rhino, and we did some good things.
Yeah, and for our community, you did some good things.
Absolutely, which is actually how I got into radio, because when I was working there, we wanted to enhance what we were doing around midsummer, and I was looking at Joy and sort of getting some rates for doing sponsorships, and I saw this thing about a radio training course, and I thought, oh, that sounds interesting. Sent in my application and did the course, and then at the end of the course, the last part of it is you sit in on a show, which happened to be Worldwide Wave. It was only a new show on Joy at that time. Pretty much they put, like, you're meant to just sit there and watch the first one. They pretty much just put the microphones on and we went.
Yeah, fantastic.
And that's 10 years on now.
10 years. Tell people what the show's about and the fact that you've been there for, as you said, for 10 years. And the importance of it. I think what you're doing is extraordinary. What's the premise of the show?
So Worldwide Wave is Joy's international LGBT news and current affairs show. So we look at all sorts of issues and news for our community around the globe. So we interview people within their countries. It might be a really newsy type thing that has happened. It might just be a country we haven't been to and we're interested in what life is like in that country. So we did a person in Cook Islands. Most people have never been there, but to ask them, well, what's your life like and what do you do? So it's quite broad. We've covered 170 countries. I think there's about 197 countries in the world, so there's a few hard ones to crack. But 10 years, about 450 odd shows. But
you've cracked some really hard ones because you've actually spoken to people where, you know, like being a gay man is jail or worse. You know, like, and you've got to find the people and you've spoken to them. How does that feel when you're speaking to that person that they're putting their life at threat talking to you? Yeah,
inspiring. And that's one of the reasons I really love being a part of this show. It's one I always remember, Cameroon in Africa. And it is a place that the most visible gay person, the head of their so-called gay group in that area, was murdered.
Whoa.
And somebody else stepped up into that role. Now, for anybody who's, you know, reasonable person, it would be okay to just be quiet and let it go. But he stepped up. He said, no, this has to change. And all around the world, there's people doing that type of thing, saying, no, there's got to be a change. And even when they don't achieve that, they keep fighting. And they keep fighting. And that's the inspiring part.
Has there been an ugly situation of somebody speaking to you and then you found out later that something has happened to them, or it hasn't ever got to that stage?
I think there's one in my memory, but not close to the interview. It doesn't happen often, which is good. Things are getting better.
What would be the most fun interview you've done, you know, like when you're speaking to somebody overseas? You know, like, there must be so many funny situations you've gotten into.
Look, we did Panty Bliss from Ireland, who's the great drag queen that was really the most visible part of their marriage equality debate, and sort of talking about that whole process from becoming drag queen to becoming this, you know, lead advocate. The two Scottish guys, so these two guys who, one was a 19-year-old gay guy who had a really rough time in school, met up at a protest march with a 40-year-old truck driver who heard his story about the troubles he went through, and they went, this has got to change. They created what we would, actually a better version of what we had here of the Safe Schools program for Scotland.
Wow.
So they said...
And this 40-year-old, was he gay?
No, straight guy.
Whoa.
Just went, and with a daughter. He said, I wouldn't want to be bringing up my daughter in a world where this sort of thing is allowed to perpetuate.
Oh, that is inspiring.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Matt, how hard is it to find these people? Like you're working a full-time job. You're a volunteer at Joy. Like you've got to find these people and track them down. Like you must spend a fair bit of time and effort doing it.
We do. We've got a little team, which is really good. I couldn't do it on my own. We figured out it takes about 12 man hours to put together the 1 hour show. By the time you do all these phone calls and emails and then the interview and put it together. Over the years, we've now got people coming back to us. So when you've been going a long time, people start to contact you. But even so, one of the most memorable interviews that I did was after the Pulse nightclub shooting in Orlando, in Florida. And we spoke to the LGBT centre there it was about 36 hours after it happened. They were providing lots of support services.
Yeah.
We contacted them and the guy said, look, I don't know. We've got all these things happening. We've got all these media contacting us. I don't know if I can get you an interview, but I'll see what you can do. We explained that we were an LGBT radio station. They prioritised us. We got an amazing interview. We were both in tears by the end. And it really sort of showed what value there is in community around the world.
What it says to me about the show that you're doing is that it's a commitment. Like, do you think sometimes it's all too hard, or it inspires you to keep on wanting to do it?
Yeah, I think you only need one interview to change that. Everybody has ups and downs, but you only need to come out of one interview going, oh my gosh, that's amazing. And it doesn't have to be, groundbreaking steps, but it is that spirit that defines so many of the LGBT people who have had challenges and who could have sat back and done nothing, but have chosen to make a difference, make a change, and make things better for the next generations to come.
How many people are involved in putting the show together?
So currently we've got sort of 4 that do various on-air. We sort of share it around a bit. One team member who now lives in America still does our social media.
Oh,
and
fantastic.
We've got a podcaster as well.
Right. Have you thought about reaching out to some younger people to get them on board?
Yeah. Look, we're conscious that Australia is a privileged society. We're pretty privileged ourselves in being able to have the facilities and the platform that Joy brings, and we want to get more diversity within our community, diversity of age, diversity of ethnicity. It's just a matter of finding people who are willing to sort of chip in.
But it is a heavy topic, isn't it? And it's a lot of work.
There are weeks which are really heavy, both in workload and in that they're not happy topics. We did one recently on state-sanctioned killings of LGBT people. It's a heavy topic, but we can't not tell the story. And we will try and bring in the personal side of things and try and give hope to people in that. But the stories have to be told. If we maintain invisibility, things aren't going to change.
What about religion? You would cover that a fair bit, I should imagine, and like how some religious groups, the brainwashing that they do to like stop you from being gay. Religion
comes up in probably every second show in some way, shape or form.
Okay.
And probably the shows that generate the most feedback from listeners involve religion. In fact, I remember we did one on Vatican City and we had messages, they just kept piling through. The other side of that, we've interviewed the world's first gay imam in France. So again, there are still people challenging those prejudices within our society, and that's what keeps me going.
Yeah. So you see that like it's being broken down all the time.
Yes.
But it's not going to happen overnight.
That's right. It's very different in different countries.
Yep.
I think though people are becoming more aware that they're not just blindly listening to their religious leaders. They're sort of hearing that, but also seeing things differently. The internet has made an incredible difference to advocacy around the world and just people being able to find out information outside of their normal space. So I think those changes will continue to happen. There'll always be a place for religion, as there should be, but hopefully it's a more accepting religion.
And it's also a case of so many priests, like throughout the world. It's not just in one country. Throughout the world, the pedophilia side of it, it's like that's encouraging in a way too, and that must make a lot of people involved in Christianity think, well, I don't know if I can trust everyone on the same plateau. And
it's one of the great ironies that many religious leaders over the years have linked homosexuality with pedophilia, when in actual fact there's a well-documented history of pedophilia in the church.
Where do you see yourself in 5, maybe 10 years' time? Like what do you want from life, or are you happy going along the way you're going? Can you see yourself in 5, 10 years still being on the show on Joy?
That's a really interesting question. I think the show must go on.
Oh, it definitely must go on.
I don't need to be there for it to go on.
But do you want to be?
I would miss the telling of those stories.
Yep.
So if there was another avenue to do that, or if we took the show, if I did something else that helped build that show, I'd be happy. At the same time, I'm quite committed to it. So I think we will make sure that the voices of the LGBT community around the world are heard, and we will get it out to as many people as possible.
Right, brilliant, good answer. Thanks for chatting with us today, and keep on doing what you're doing on Joy, because it's such an important show. Worldwide wave.
Tuesday nights at 7 on Joy.
All right, okay. Thank you, Matt McDonell, for being on Bent TV today. And you'll see me again real soon. I'm David Hunt. Thank you so much for watching.